And we're a little topsy-turvy. Gary's on last, Saul's out. Bill Dessel is supposed to be here from Kiel Vodka. I think that strategy of one for me, one for you, finally I caught up with him. But hopefully we'll get him rescheduled and get him back here. Gary, we got a lot of stuff going on, federal and state and city. Well, let's start in Washington. We have just literally constant change in the White House. And is it creating just a obstacle to governing right now?
Yes.
You talk to folks in Washington daily.
Well, yes, it has. There's no way to get around the uncertainty, the chaos coming from the White House. And so it's taking oxygen out of the room. That and the Russian affair taking oxygen out of the room. Some of the president's comments about wanting to get rid of the attorney general, who happens to be the best performing member of his cabinet right now. He's doing exactly what the president wants on most issues. And so it is a problem. But today we have a new chief of staff. The new chief of staff certainly has the credentials. The general, she led forces, served with Leon Panetta when he was Secretary of Defense over at the Pentagon. There was a personnel change on his first day. If you were hiring a communication director, you would hope the first word, he didn't use the F word as his first word out of his mouth. And so that's been rectified. So yes, it's been a problem, but I'm hopeful that General Kelly will bring his experience and bring some organization and order to the process. But it's a long answer. But at the end of the day, it gets back to the president. General, if he tweets and he takes the administration off message and goes down all these blind alleys, then you could have the 12 apostles and General Kelly. It's not going to change very much, but I'm hopeful. I think it's a very good sign.
Should General Kelly have made it a condition upon taking the position that that there is an approval process of the president's tweets? Are we literally to that point? Would we? The thought 5 years ago that the entire country's healthcare policy, tax policy, foreign relations, all are being undermined by social media might have gotten you institutionalized for the concept.
Well, I don't know what private conversations that General had with the president. I know.
Should he have?
I think how they handle communications is something the chief of staff needs to be concerned about. Now, a president using social media is not the worst thing in the world.
Nope.
Until 1930s, presidents didn't use the radio.
Right.
One of the geniuses of Franklin Roosevelt was his radio fireside chats, which everyone in the country listened to. He swayed opinion. We have social media, tweets there. So if the president's going to tweet, then it ought to be strategic.
Yeah.
He ought to have been tweeting about health care. He ought to have been tweeting about tax policy. He ought to be tweeting about things that are really important to the American people. And if it helps him get his message out by doing it, then do it in a disciplined way. So, I don't know what obviously they're the only people that know what their conversation, was. But I think General Kelly gives the administration a chance to start a new day if the president believes it's the right way to go.
Healthcare, let's talk a little bit about last week's vote. Obviously, John McCain being the deciding vote, very dramatic swing vote, somewhat unanticipated, I think, a little bit. I think John McCain had multiple motivations. I'm sure one of them was protecting some level of health care protection for the most vulnerable people in a state, and also probably payback's a bitch when you constantly criticize and undermine what I think by all measures about John McCain is, a tremendous patriot and a person who'd sacrifice immensely for the United States.
Yeah, I'm not going to second guess John McCain or anybody else because it goes back to a bigger issue.
Sure.
And the bigger issue is that for 7 years, we Republicans talked about repealing and replacing Obamacare. I read every word that Paul Ryan and his team wrote. They called it, it's interesting, the Democrats have a better deal. Paul Ryan 6 months ago had a better way as a Republican, program. But at the end of the day, raising all the right philosophical issues, pointing out the serious flaws in Obamacare, we were not ready with a legislative program. And so you can talk about John McCain's vote. I wish he had voted, with the majority and kept the process going. He didn't. But the bigger issue was not having a credible plan. And I think this gives an opportunity, if it's handled wisely, to reset. It doesn't necessarily have to be bipartisan, but it has to be credible. It can't ignore the governors. It can't ignore certain of the other healthcare providers. And let's see, Obamacare is a problem. The only way to save Obamacare is to have more federal spending, to give insurance companies bigger subsidies, to give the states more dollars to expand their Medicaid program. And the federal government, I don't think anyone's noticed, but we have some really big debt problems. We have to increase the debt limit. This is September. The Secretary of the Treasury says by the end of September we'll be out of money. So there's not going to be a lot of money to grow these things, and we need structural reform. We need, I think, a more market-based, patient-centered, system. And the truth of the matter is, the proposals that were put up were flawed, and shame on us for having flawed proposals.
Tax reform?
Well, see,
at the federal level, is that doable without health care? Is it the better strategy to do tax reform first and then come back to health care?
So, when people talk about tax reform, I'm not sure we're talking about tax reform or tax cuts. It's a big difference.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to learn from the mistakes of healthcare and get it right. The administration put out a one-page outline. We would do more in the city of Providence on tax policy than a one-page outline.
Right.
And so the details become very important, and restoring public confidence is important. And it seems to me there are two things that we have to accomplish in federal tax cuts and tax reform. One, we have to do something about the corporate tax. The corporate tax, our rates are internationally not competitive. They're too high. We can't get money back into the country that's earned overseas. So anyone, except the most extreme liberals, recognizes that we have to do something to fix up our corporate tax structure. So that's
on that issue, is it better to do piecemeal and try and pick off issue by issue where there's common ground, or is it better to do these omnibus mega bills? Like 1986 tax reform was a big bill, bipartisan, crafted by Republican Packwood and Bradley and Chafee and Rostenkowski. I mean, it was a...
But there were a lot of people working on that before it got to
for a long
point.
time.
And
Right.
we had a president that was very skillful politically in dealing with the Congress. Some of those things don't exist. I think we have to look at what the problems are. We have two big tax problems, and we have one that may be a problem, but it's not politically doable. One is, as I mentioned, to fix up the corporate tax and do that in the most comprehensive way you can, so we become more competitive, with the belief that if we have a fairer, more balanced corporate tax structure, that'll help keep money here and create jobs. The second is on the income tax, and we have to focus like a laser, and this is probably not as traditional as people have spoken about it. The bottom line of income tax change is to get more take-home pay in the pockets of the average working-class American. I was looking at the president's tax proposal, and the numbers are that if you're in the top 1%, you make over $760,000.
Right.
90% of those people will get a tax cut, and the average tax cut's $196,000. If you're in the bottom 20%, and by the bottom 20%, I mean the families and folks making less than $25,000, 65% of those people will get a tax cut, averages $100. Well, my concern is we have to recognize that there has been wage stagnation, even the jobs that are coming back. Just to mention another number in Rhode Island, the governor
Right.
brags about jobs coming back. Well, the fact of the matter is that about a third of the jobs that have come back pay less than $45,000. And so those are the economic realities. So I would focus like a laser on two things in my tax policy. I would try to get the corporate tax fixed up so we can compete and get money and investment back in this country. And I would do everything I could to increase the take-home pay of middle America. Now, that's not comprehensive tax reform, but given the political environment that we're in, I think you have to have clearly defined objectives and talk about omnibus tax reform when we cannot agree on what that means would be very difficult. They're going to be focused and realistic.
Well, okay, so Washington is a frustrating place with a government that doesn't work. Let's go to Rhode Island state government.
That's where the
Clearly,
government works,
that's
right?
where it all works so smoothly. We are at, we're over a month of a no budget. He said, you broke your promise, you did this, we're not coming back till the next millennium. Then there's signs that there's going to be cooling to their machismo frustration with one another. Any insights into where we are now, and when do the cities and towns start taking the little hits and the big hits?
Well, they've started already, just because of the confusion in getting at their tax bills. That's
In education budgets, right?
yeah. Well, see, that's where I try to understand what the big hit versus the little hit are. If you were promised $100 and you were promised $25 every quarter, and the first quarter you got $20, but in the last quarter you got $30, at the end of the year you're there. So if in fact that the school aid formula is eventually approved, then it's a cash flow issue.
Okay.
Now, the liability and the uncertainty comes in, well, what happens if it's not improved and revenues don't materialize and we have other problems? Could we make a change? And that's not fair to the cities when having that uncertainty out there. So it's a hit. It's a hit that can be easily rectified. I'm hoping that they come back in the next couple of weeks and, and pass a budget, and then come back in September and clean up whatever else they feel they need to clean up. But it's an inconvenience. It's taking hits. We're one of 2 or 3 states without a budget. Most of the other states that don't have a budget have legitimate policy differences between parties or between ideologies. We have a sandbox fight, and it's really not good for governance. And I'm optimistic. I don't have any information that other people don't have, but I'm optimistic within the next short period of time that we'll have a budget and move from there.
Well, when does a Moody's, a Fitch, a Standard & Poor's say, there's a lack of governing here, we need to send a little message, this is a little state that shouldn't be acting like this, it's not a healthy enough state to be acting like this, and let's lob one across the bow?
Well, I don't know, and it depends on where they get the mood to do it. But if we don't have a budget by Labor Day, I think it's very conceivable that they will change us from a stable outlook to a negative outlook.
And then that starts to cost money.
Well, not really. That depends on what the market conditions are, and when you sell your bonds and what bonds you sell. Because your credit rating stays the same. They're not going to change our bond rating in the short term over this, in my opinion. They may put us on negative watch, but keep this in mind too, which people are not aware of. We're a AA credit rating. That's a very strong credit rating. Only one above the AAA. But there are 29 states that either have a AA plus or a AAA.
Yep.
And so, we're in the lower half of the states, and when you look at bond ratings, from Moody's, though the differences are very small, but I think when you look at the fundamentals, the economy hasn't changed for better or worse. The fundamentals of what Moody's would look at don't change. It's the political mess on getting an adopted budget. I don't know what their grace period would be, but there's no sense to tempt the gods. Let's just get it fixed up. We're not having a big fight over the policy. There's no real issue out there.
No, just boys being boys. Where are we going? I mean, we got to get through this skirmish. Let's call it a political skirmish. But when we come back, are we hamstrung for the next year because of election cycle, or will we see any progress? Will there be any strategy? You look at the bills that are the big bills this year, it's hard to come up that this is a pro-business year or pro-growth. There's some for the unions, there's some for this, there's some for extending additional benefits to people. Is that part of our problem, to be able to become a higher ranked place for business to come and do business?
I think it's more fun. I don't know what's going to happen in the third year of a governor's legislative session.
Yeah.
Normally you're right. Normally as you get closer and closer to an election, unless there's a really compelling reason, there's less opportunity to do big things. But we have done big things. See, we have put in place this commissari. According to press reports, it spent $160 million.
It's about 83 in rebuild awards.
And the
Yeah.
Qualified Jobs
Yeah,
Program.
absolutely.
And so we're building all these office buildings and these hotels. I know we're going to talk about tax stabilization. We're giving companies all kinds of tax breaks. We're building things. That was our opportunity. That was our investment. And I'm not sure that's the best possible economic development strategy. It's certainly part of a strategy, but it increases the importance of real estate beyond some of the other things, innovation. I know the governor's talked about spending money on education. We've done some good work in computer literacy. But should we be investing more in that? Should we be investing more in people and less in bricks and mortar? That's the question. We made a decision that we were going to try to do both, but the balance was on. That's the source of concern. So I think there is a question of missed opportunity, not
Yeah.
that we take advantage of it. And I look at some numbers recently. A number
I like when you look at numbers.
Well, I look at numbers
Yeah, I
too.
like when you look at numbers.
First down, second down.
Yeah, yeah,
But
right.
the jobs that we're creating, a third of them pay less than $45,000. That we've recovered our jobs. I think we're the 40th state to recover the jobs we lost
Back
during
to
the recession.
07, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We lost 39,800 jobs. 13 to 14,000 were recovered during this administration. That means that in the first quarter of this year, these are figures that Len Ladaro from URI mentioned. Our growth in the economy was 0.7, with 35th in terms of growth in state gross product. So I see these numbers, and then I try to reconcile them with the numbers of jobs that the governor's speaking about, and there seems to be a disconnect, and that's a source of concern.
I have to say, I think it, listen, she's going to have $3 million, and she's going to, in all likelihood, be the Democratic nominee, although you never know with former Governor Chafee. Whenever you say he's out, he usually wins. But I think the one area she gets herself into trouble, I think what you hear on the street, is when she promises, over analyzes what the benefit has been, and I think that has the potential. The rule is in business, under promise and over deliver, and I think she gets that topsy-turvy every now and then.
Well, the rule is, if you're a family of four, and you're sitting in Cranston, and you're making $100,000.
Yep. There's a lot of those.
One spouse is a school teacher, and another spouse works at the hospital, or
Yep, sure.
a nurse or a policeman or whatever. Do you feel better right now?
No.
Do you feel the state's going in the right direction? And as long as the polls, and this is the Hassefeld polls, we've done this, ever since she's been in office. Before that, right direction, wrong direction.
Yeah.
It's always in the high 30s. It's between 35
Right
and
direction.
40,
Yeah.
right direction. The other polls that come out have it a little higher than that. Her polls may be higher, but it's never 50%.
No.
So there's a feeling in the state that with all that's being done, and some positive things are being done. The fact that we got, even though they're small, and they're very possible to be blown away if the economy changes. We did get General Electric, we did get Virgin Pulse. There are certainly positive things on the horizon.
Absolutely.
TF Green is going like gangbusters
Yep.
right now. So there are positive things happening, but they haven't yet been translated down to that family I mentioned, living in Cranston, and they don't have any greater certainty that the kids that they're sending to college today are going to end up with jobs in Rhode Island.
Let's talk about it. You're in the know Republican to some degree. Joe Trillo, does he run for governor?
I don't know. He says he is. Until he tells me he's not. I assume
Patricia
he's-
Morgan run for governor?
She's thinking about it. She's a sports writer. I can't give you any inside information on that. So don't know.
Tony, do you have this truth serum? Do you have that tiered up?
There's a come with bourbon.
And does Lincoln Chafee run?
I don't know. I really don't know. I've heard same gossip you've heard.
Yep.
One day.
Well, it's not gossip. He comes over here on a regular
what's
basis,
he telling you? You should
lights up the governor.
ask the horse. Well, then you should go right to the horse and ask him.
Yeah, that's right. Let's end with if you had a magic wand for the state of Rhode Island, what's the one thing Rhode Island government, policymakers, business community should focus on for the coming year?
Well, there's so many and they're interrelated, but two things, in my opinion.
I, of course, say one thing, and you, of course, turn it into two things.
I'll say one.
No, go with your two.
I'll go
No.
Because it's so related to my second, that's so obvious I didn't mention it, is we have to, we talk about doing something about these property taxes.
Yeah.
And if you look at, why Rhode Island ranks as a poor business climate, there are two reasons. We have very high unemployment insurance costs, and we have very high property taxes. I think our property tax burden is, is a 44th. Our income and sales taxes are becoming more competitive in those kinds of rankings. That's point one. Point two, it's not just the tax, the overdependence upon the tax, it's the system and the structure of the tax we have is anti-business. You had the story in the Go Local today about having Providence having the fifth highest commercial taxes. That's not a new story.
No.
That's been around for over a decade now. So as a result, to attract business, because no one will make an investment here because they can't afford to, you go to Providence and the effective commercial property tax rate's about 3.7%. It's a little 2% in Boston. Boston, of the 53 largest cities in each state, Boston's 28th. Providence is fifth. So we're not. Philadelphia's 27th. So we're not competitive, in the region. So we give out all these tax stabilization agreements. We give out all these preferential tax deals. People build things, but the cost of government's not going down.
No.
And so these people are not paying taxes. Well, unless the cost of government is brought down, then the homeowner, the small business guy, the business that's here has to pick up the bill. And that's an economic policy which I would kind of define as a dog chasing its tail. And how many dogs do you know have caught their tail? Right. I think that's a big part of the problem. So I'd do something about this property tax.
I think this is an important issue. And I'll also add one other factor, and I think we're just before it. I think we have some cities and towns that are very dependent on the revenue from retail, and cities like Warwick. And I think we're going to see a decay in brick and mortar retail at a very rapid move over the next couple of years. And Providence Place Mall being another place, the shift to 2-hour free parking. They didn't do that because they love the Providence residents. They did it because they're very worried about their business and the competition with online and competition with Garden City that's taken some of their major retailers, and that's something to be concerned about.
But Garden City is a great case in point.
Absolutely.
Even though retail is declining.
Yep.
And the decline in retail here is no different than is happening elsewhere.
No.
There are two things that you can draw attention to. The first is, Garden City's retailing is not declining.
Yep.
And so what are the reasons that Garden City's retailing is expanding and growing and other retailers are declining? And it has a lot to do with how you do your business.
Yep.
That's point one. The second, and we may be out of this ballgame before it starts, the online sellers realize that they have to build warehouses, they have to provide services. It's not like Amazon was 10 years ago when I would go online and buy a book for half price. It's much more complicated, and their business model is much more complicated.
1,600 jobs over in Fall River, Mass.
And God bless Fall River, and the Hassenfeld Institute's done a lot of work with the city of Fall River and work with the new administration. And so I just, I'm very happy, for that. Rhode Island is the center of southeast New England.
Yep.
Of the New England region, this is our place. The major Amazon distribution center move 35 miles east of here.
Yeah.
And so how do you recoup from that? That's the leadership kind of issue, and that's the strategic issue.
Well, I don't think we enhanced it by Congressman Cicilline announcing that he was going to look into antitrust issues on Amazon related to their purchase of Whole Foods. I would think the folks over there might check the black mark next to Rhode Island for future expansion. Although, interesting enough, Amazon in hiring for Fall River is having job fairs in Rhode Island.
No, but they will have, but this is an interesting point. So what kind of economic base will Rhode Island have? Will become more and more a bedroom community.
Yeah.
Go to the train station in the morning, try to find a seat. Certainly by the time the train gets to Attleboro, it's tough to find a seat. People going to work in Boston. I used to commute back and forth when I taught at Northeastern, and I would catch the train late evening, 7, 8 o'clock, and when it got to Northeastern stop, which was only one stop from Back Bay.
Sure.
I had to stand for a while.
Yeah.
Till it got down to Mansfield or somewhere, and so there, there's that there. So if jobs are created in Boston and Fall River, that's good, for Rhode Islanders because it's a source of employment. But in terms of the economic vitality of this as a state, we become more of a bedroom community, and it's different than.
Well, and I'll also say that's not what Rhode Island's big competitive advantage is, right? Is that you're close to work, you're close to the beach, you're close to all these things. If the only way you can support your family is to jump on a train and add a plus or minus 3-hour commute to your day, the housing price might be lower than it is in Boston suburbs, but it's not the quality of life that you might and your family might yearn for.
Yeah, and it's also affects the kind of business leadership we have in the state, because as we become more of a community that's exporting our workers to whether it's Fall River or New Bedford. Or,
can you imagine that we're exporting jobs to Fall River?
Well, then you have less business ownership here.
Right.
You have less contributions to charity. You have less business leadership. You have a different level of business leadership. And it really sets a narrative for the economy of the state. But there's one figure people don't talk about. This is the biggest driver of economic development when you swipe away all the noise and the numbers and things that we go back and forth on politically, is population.
Yeah.
If a community's population is not growing, I can almost guarantee you
its economy
is going to follow.
Yeah. Money Man, I appreciate it. Thank you very
much.
On that positive note, population stagnation means economic depression.
I didn't know. I just Malthus, right?
Thanks as always. Always insightful, always helpful, and greatly appreciate you advancing the discussion. Listen, my view is you can't fix the problems until you identify them. And hopefully we'll see some progress over the next few months. And maybe even the General Assembly will come back and finalize a budget.
I think they will.
Yeah.
I think we just